Diane with National Garden Bureau. And if you happen to see a Gail posting things in our chat, there's going to be some links posted from our panelists' websites and other things that come up again. So with that, I'm going to do a quick intro here, and then I'm going to let each one of my panelists introduce themselves. So my quick introduction is that we have Lacey from Easy Elegance Roses. We have Rebecca from David Austin Roses. We have Georgia from Monrovia, and guess what? She has roses in her background. We have Kristen from Star Roses, and we have Christian from Gardens Alive. And so, which order? Okay, so Lacey, why don't you introduce yourself and your company?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. My name's Lacey Grignani. I'm with Easy Elegance, which is a brand of roses that is owned by Bailey Nurseries, if you are familiar with that company. And I've actually been involved in the rose industry for the past 16 years, and my middle name is Rose. So I feel like it just kind of goes hand in hand, which is kind of always fun. But our collection is a little unique compared to some of the other rose brands that are represented today. We don't just have one type of rose in Easy Elegance. We have 18 different types of roses. So they're an assortment of colors. Some are ground covers, Grandiflora hybrid teas, but they have all been trialed and tested throughout the US and Canada and are all own root roses, which I'm sure we will discuss here today as well. But that means that you're getting a true to type rose that comes back year after year, especially in some of those colder climates. So our tagline is roses you can grow, because we want to instill confidence and give all of you that assurance and confidence that you will be successful and be able to grow these roses at home.
That's awesome. And that's why we're doing this webinar. We want to make sure everybody is successful. So, okay, Rebecca, we'll toss it to you.
Yes, my name is Rebecca Corradum. I'm the U.S. Sales Executive for David Austin Roses. We are breeders of English roses, and yes, we come from England. We're sold in 35 countries around the world. I get questions a lot about, well, if this is an English rose, can they actually grow and thrive in some place like the Deep South where it's so hot and humid? And yes, they can. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I do have to divulge a secret. I was not always a fan of roses. I was a garden editor at Southern Living, oh my gosh, 20 years ago, when Michael Marriott actually gave me a bare root Darcy Bustle and a Strawberry Hill. I did everything wrong. I came home from a shoot one night in July and I was like, what is this insane fragrance? And literally walked around my garden and found it was Strawberry Hill flowering after I had really done a horrible job planting it. But we're going to give you that confidence today, and you are with an amazing panel for asking questions from.
And thank you for sharing that little oops in your history. We've all got some of those. That should be one of my questions, I think. We'll see. We may ask that question. Okay, Georgia.
Yeah, hi, my name is Georgia Clay. I am the plant selections manager for Monrovia Nursery. Monrovia is a wholesale nursery. We provide a lot of high quality plants, but definitely a lot of roses, specifically a lot of shrub roses, easy landscape, disease tolerant roses to independent garden centers throughout the United States. We grow at 3 different nurseries. We have a nursery in Georgia, California, and in Oregon, and we trial roses, thousands of varieties at all 3 of those locations. And we are celebrating our 100-year anniversary this year.
Happy anniversary. That's wonderful. Okay, and Kristen, you're next.
Hi, happy to be here today talking about roses. I am Kristen Smith. I work for Star Roses and Plants. I have worked for the company almost 20 years now, so quite a long time with roses. Our company dates back to 1897, so we're well over 100 years old. Close to 10 years ago, we were acquired by Ball Horticultural Company, so one of the largest firms in horticulture in the world. And we work with a lot of external breeder partners. So we celebrated 90 years of partnership with Mayond International Last May, we worked with Cordis, breeder in northern Germany, and Will Radler based out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So we are introducers of the Knockout family of roses, the Drift series, a relatively newer collection brand of roses called Bloomables and Scentables. We have close to, I think, 200 varieties in our catalog. So I manage all the evaluations across the US. We have some locations in California. I'm based in the southeastern PA location. But we put a lot of work and effort into trialing the roses really thoroughly. So we feel really confident when they go out to market and get introduced into the marketplace.
Excellent. Okay. And Christian.
Hi, everyone. Christian Bedard. I'm Research Director for Gardens Alive, which are mostly mail order like Brex, Spring Hills, and Gurney, where you could buy your roses on mail orders. They also the owner of Gardener Supplies in New England, new acquisition recently. I've been breeding roses for over 30 years. The last 25 years, I was the research director for Weeks Roses, and prior to that, I've done rose breeding on Cole Hardy with Agriculture Canada. So if you do the math, that's 25 plus 4, that's 29. I just say plus 30. But before that, I've been playing in my backyard doing breeding. So one question I'm asked regularly is how many rows have I introduced? And I don't know, I don't keep track of them, but I just say, since I know probably someone wants to know, I've introduced 82 so far. So I'll be glad to help you in answering some of the questions.
Okay, that's perfect. So what's your goal? If it's 82 thus far, what's your end goal?
I want to reach 100, right?
Okay. Okay. I'm sure you will. That's great. Okay. And now we're going to do kind of reverse order because Christian, you already said one, but I'm not sure if that was the one question that you wanted. So I like to ask our panelists, you know, you're in a social situation and it's non-horticulture, it's not at a trade show. And let's say your in-laws or your next door neighbor says, what do you do for a living? And you talk about your involvement with roses. What is their number one question about roses or growing roses? So Christian, we're going to go back to you and we're going to do the reverse order.
Yeah, well, first everybody think it's pretty weird to be a rose breeder. That's the first reaction. What? You're a rose breeder? They don't even think something exists as a plant breeder. Then I say it's like an animal breeder, but I hybridize plant. That's when they get a little more interested by the topic. And I mean, most of the question, I think it's about pruning, winter, I don't know. I mean, watering, pruning, and fertilizing and insects. Those are probably the 4 most asked question. Pruning, I just give them very easy advice. Just cut them down. Don't make it too complicated. Just. I mean, I like to show a picture of the tractor in the field where we have the tractor blade chopping the plant. And then I show the picture after full bloom in the field in the spring. I say, here you go, guys. Don't make it too complicated. Just chop them and they're going to come back in bloom. So that's my first advice I give to people about pruning. And I've done a video about pruning and I just cut the plant without even looking. And I say, here's the shape. That's it. Good enough. And it'll come back full bloom. So don't make it too complicated. That's my advice.
I think by the end of this webinar, hopefully everybody's going to understand that don't overthink it. Don't make it too complicated, you know? Okay, let's hear it. Going back, Kristen.
So probably the number one question I get is, what's your favorite rose? There's a lot out there. My predecessor, his answer to that question was always the rose I haven't introduced yet. So I always get a chuckle out of that. But to answer the question, I would say probably Sitting Pretty. It's been on the market maybe 5 to 6 years now, maybe a little bit longer, and it's a Will Radler variety. It's a really pretty pink Grandiflora type that has some medium fragrance. It's very hardy. It's hardy to zone 4, and it just blooms. It's one of the very first things to bloom in our field. Our trial fields in Pennsylvania has great disease resistance. So that's my favorite rose.
All right, and let's hear who was before Kristen. I've lost my list. I think it was Georgia. So what's the number one question you get?
Well, let's see. A lot of it is the same as Christian, I feel like, all the pruning and all the things, but A lot of people ask me, is that fragrant?
Mhm.
Whenever we talk about roses. And we're seeing a big resurgence in people wanting fragrant roses. So a lot now I can say yes to a lot of those things. So what we found is that a lot of the disease-resistant shrub roses had lost fragrance, and now intense breeding work has brought the two together again. So with series like Monrovia introduced the Eau de Parfum series, which combines the toughness of the shrub roses with the fragrance of those old-fashioned type roses. So I get that question a lot, and I always like it when I can say yes. Yes, they are.
Yes, they're back. Yes. And with the trend for nostalgia gardening, that's even more important. So kudos. And Rebecca, your most commonly asked question.
What is the best rose? And I'm like going, that's such a loaded question. So I turn it around to them and I go, what do you want this rose to do for you? A lot of people don't think of roses as problem solvers, that they can be hedges. They can go over doors, they can be barriers, they can be a part of a mixed shrub or perennial border, or you can have the precious parterre. Then once you decide what you want that rose to do for you, then we can go in and kind of look at the different forms of a rose, like Queen of Sweden is very vertical and upright, great for small spaces. Do you want something to grow in a container? Do you want something large like Generous Gardener to go over a big arbor? So think about that. It's great to be a rose collector, but these roses, everyone here has a rose that can solve a problem for you. So
Excellent answer. And Lacey.
Well, I hear all the questions that everyone else has already spoken about. I think that, the favorite rose one is something that I always get asked. Um, Especially if somebody knows my middle name is Rose, they think I just have this quick go-to list, which I usually do. I have some favorites. But I think something that hasn't been said is people will ask, and we know that that's kind of sometimes a hurdle in rose gardening as people are scared of the thorns. But there are a lot of varieties that are nearly thornless, or they have a lot of the soft thorns, so they really shouldn't be a deterrent. But usually the prettiest ones have thorns, it just kind of comes hand in hand. But another question I think that is common is they will ask, how do I keep it in a vase in my kitchen? So I think that's also something that's fun about roses, is that you can bring them from the garden to an indoor space and enjoy them. And some do last longer than others. That's just the nature of the beast. But there are a lot of roses that will last a long time in a vase. So I think that adds to that, just the enjoyment of a rose. It's not just in the garden, it can be in your indoor space as well. And they don't have to be the long stem roses. They can be from your garden, cut and put into a vase.
Very good. Okay, so those are the commonly asked questions of our panelists, but now our panelists are going to explain the different rose types, because a rose is not a rose is not a rose, we do have some different classifications here. So Kristen, I think you were going to talk about shrub roses.
Yeah, so shrub roses is generally referred to a class of roses that are hardy and low maintenance. So usually at least hardy to zone 5, maybe potentially even hardier. And low maintenance, meaning just that they're really free flowering. They have generally kind of tamed, good habits. You can find shrub roses in a variety of different colors. Our most popular collection of shrub roses is the Knockout family of roses. And typically I would say shrub roses tend to be more singles, but you can find them kind of in higher petal counts. Some may double to also double.
Okay. And Floribunda, Christian, you're going to take Floribunda and Grandiflora and explain those two types.
Okay, so Floribunda, actually, technically, all roses are shrubs, technically, even though they're classified into different class, but they're all shrub plants. So a Floribunda is still a shrub, but it's a higher petalage shrub. So Floribunda normally, again, I'm using the normally because there's so many different rules. Some of them are more upright, or normally they're more rounded. They come in medium to big clusters. But here's the twist. What happened to a compact plant with one single stem? Then it's a non-clustering Floribunda because hybrid teas are more upright and 6 feet tall. Then if you have something that's 3 feet tall, rounded, and one flower per stem, that's a non-clustering Floribunda. So classification is not perfect, but technically, again, on average, like 80% of the Floribunda are more rounded, produce flowers in clusters, and higher petalage count than shrub. Yeah, that would be a Floribunda. And then a Grandiflora is kind of, and I'm using again kind of because it's not perfectly cut. Originally, they talk about a cross between a Floribunda and a hybrid tea. So think about a hybrid tea, one single stem per one flower per stem, and a Floribunda being a cluster of multiple flower. Cross them together, then you have the habit of a hybrid tea, which is more upright, but with 2 or 3 flower per cluster. That would be a Grandiflora. So you have increased the flower size from the Floribunda to the Grandiflora, but it's a little smaller than the hybrid tea. That will be a Grandiflora. But they either Grandiflora and Floribunda can be fragrant, come in multiple colors, and they're some of my favorite personally. So,
Okay. And then Lacey, you're going to talk about ground cover roses, which maybe are self-explanatory.
Come to think of it, it probably is one of the more self-explanatory definitions, because as Christian was alluding to, there's a lot of different rules. Ground cover roses typically are exactly what it sounds like. They're low spreading habit. They generally are more compact. There are some that are larger, but some of the brands that are out there like Drift Roses or Flower Carpet, they are more of a compact size with smaller blooms. And they also make really great border plants, or they just fill in a space. Really, I think a way that I've always remembered them are minimal effort and maximum coverage. So it's just, to me, it's a very easier plant to grow, and you're going to get a lot of color, and it's going to fill up a space in your garden really well.
Excellent. Plant it and forget it, almost. Okay. Kristen, hybrid tea roses as a category.
Yeah, so hybrid tea, I would just kind of equate the shape and look of it to like what you think of as like a cut flower. So just think of your traditional kind of like cut flower form. So hybrid teas are going to be generally like pretty like upright and tall in the garden, usually with like a high center. So kind of where like the inner petals are like higher than like the lower petals. So you're going to get kind of like that nice traditional form. They're usually very high petal count. And typically, like Christian was talking about, the Grandiflora, so the hybrid teas typically will just have one bloom per stem. So yeah, that's a hybrid tea.
Okay, thank you. And then I just realized, okay, Rebecca, you've got climbing roses, maybe another self-explanatory one.
Yeah, so climbing roses are going to have the long canes. So when you get a bare root or potted climbing rose, unless it is several years old and is already being trained on a trellis in the pot when you buy it, they're going to look just like the shrub roses. And it's going to take a couple of years for those canes to start coming out and extending. And you go, and we've had people call us. So Lady of Shalott and Teasing Georgia kind of has split personalities. And people will go, this thing's sending out big canes. I thought it was a shrub. Well, it could be a shrub, or you could train it as like a climber on a privacy fence. When you see roses sending out these very vigorous arching canes, that's a great hint that it wants to climb. Some things, if you have really harsh winters, you may not have a rose actually want to climb because the cold weather is keeping it knocked back. Other things, like you may have something in Houston, Texas, where Lady of Shalott definitely wants to be a climber because the weather is conducive to that. So if you just let those canes go straight up, you're only going to get flowering on the tip. What you really want to do is get those large canes trained to go out to at least a 45-degree angle or horizontal. So the flowering shoots will come off the sides. And that's what you're actually, once you get the framework of the climber trained into the shape you want, then you can start pruning and changing those little flowering shoots off the side. And that's how you get flowers down low on your plant. Now, there's another type of rose that falls in the climber called a rambler. And if you're new to climbers, even though rambler sounds like a very, very scary term, you may want to opt for a rambler because there's often fewer thorns. The canes are a lot smaller. They're easier to bend. And they're actually easier to train and sometimes a little more forgiving. So don't fear the ramblers too. That's a good category for you to try if you've never tried a climber.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, Georgia, you get miniature roses, and I know what one of the questions is going to be about that one, but I'll let you explain them first.
Okay, well, I would say miniature roses also pretty self-explanatory, but they are just very small roses. So they're small in stature. So, 2 feet tall they can be or less. Sometimes small blooms, small foliage, just kind of cute plants. They're exceptionally tough. They're usually pretty hardy, and they're great for containers. So if you're into container gardening, miniature roses are great for that.
And that was going to be the question after that is, first of all, a lot of them are given as gifts and they're indoors. So the question was going to be, can you plant them outdoors? So what would you say on average, I know there's some variability, would be the zone hardiness for a miniature rose?
Well, we definitely say zone 4. Zone 4 is a really a good, that's what we grow one. It's called Itsy Bitsy Peach, and that is a zone 4.
Okay, excellent. Well, guess what, panelists? While you were chatting and talking, we have gotten a lot of questions in. I'm trying to kind of categorize them. So let's start with soil. Not so. Yeah, let's start with soil. Start from the ground up. What is the best type of soil? How do you amend your soil if it's not the best type of soil? Who wants to talk about dirt?
I love dirt. Any rose is going to do well in a well-drained, loamy soil. I mean, don't we all wish we had that? Not necessarily, do we? There's a lot of heavy clay out there. Heavy clay has a lot of nutrients, but adding organic matter, whether you have sandy soil or heavy clay, is really going to open it up. I am not a huge advocate of reinventing your soil. I think that, you want to amend it enough with some type of compost or soil conditioner to encourage those new roots. If your soil is so bad you can't work it and there's standing water, then I would recommend going to a really raised bed or even planting in a container.
Okay. Any other comment? What about soil amendments? We all know what compost is. Are there some suggested soil amendments?
It really depends on where you're gardening. I see people coming in from Canada on this. I would go to your local garden center and say, what do you recommend for my area?
That's an excellent suggestion. We always say that. Go to your local garden center, your local retailer, or find your county extension master gardener office. Yeah, so they're the ones that know the local area. Okay,
Yep.
So that's great to talk about dirt. And let's talk about sun. Do all roses need full sun? Who wants to answer that one?
I'll jump in, and I would say we always recommend at least 6 hours of sun for roses. They just really love sun and they need it for kind of peak blooming and condition. There are kind of anecdotally some roses that, people have noticed do well in less sun. I just always caution people if it's not going to be 6 hours of sun, just there could be some potentially more issues with some disease or, just reduced overall flower production. So I think generally the more sun, the better.
Yeah, if I could just add, I mean, I've grown roses in 4 of sun in California, depending where you're located. Also, like sunny California, 4 of intense sun, they're probably okay. But yes, so if you don't have that, you will increase the probability of getting diseases on the plant, and also they will bloom less. So again, it also depends on the intensity of the sun where you're located.
Definitely. Some David Austins will bloom in only 4 hours of sun. And we do list that on our website if you're interested. But do qualify, as Kristen was saying, the quality of the sun. I always recommend morning sun that transitions into the afternoon. I would never plant a rose in morning shade and then have it hit at noon to 2 o'clock in full blazing sun, especially if you're in really hot areas of the US, like the deep South, Southern California, Texas, Arizona, because you're going to egg on disease and stress problems that cause disease. So keep that in mind too.
Very good. Okay, so the next question, there's a lot of different questions about fertilizer. What's the best fertilizer plan for older rose bushes? What kind of fertilizer for new bushes? How frequently do you fertilize? What type of year do you fertilize? I think I'm capturing all the fertilizer questions. So it looks like that's a hot topic today. So let's spend some time on fertilizer.
Well, I would just say, typically it's time to fertilize in the spring when your roses start to push new growth. So we typically look for when the leaves start to emerge and open up. It's a great time to apply a slow release fertilizer. Again, you can go to your local garden center and they can point you to a really great rose fertilizer. But add a slow release fertilizer followed by a layer of compost, then mulch over it, and that'll be a really good base for the rest of the year.
So what I'm hearing is fertilize in the spring, and you shouldn't need to fertilize again the rest of the year?
Not typically. You don't have to. Maybe some of our other panelists might have a different opinion, but for a lot of the modern shrub roses, that Monrovia specializes in, that one bout of fertilizer in the spring should do you pretty well.
Well, it depends on the type of fertilizer you're using. So some people like to do liquid fertilizer, then you have to do a little more often. It's probably every 2 weeks. Some people use a plain granular, then that phase out in like a month and a half. Then you want to probably apply it for 3 times a year, plus or minus. And the same thing with the slow release. There is an indication on the package. They don't last 4 or 5 months. Depending on the temperature, they degrade faster depending on the temperature. So I would say, yeah, even if it's a slow release, you probably would have to fertilize 1 or 2 more times in the summer. Again, depending on the growing season. If you're in California, you have like 6 bloom from March to October, December. You gotta feed those plants. If you're in Maine and you have 1 flower in August and that's it, then maybe one round of fertilizer is enough. Again, it depends on where you're located. When you have like year-round growth like California, the plant's gonna really suck the fertilizer from the ground. So the compost and the fertilizer is very important.
Very much so. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you do live somewhere where there are seasons, you do typically don't want to fertilize past summertime. So you don't necessarily need to give your plants any fertilizer in the fall because they're starting to go into that dormancy period where they need to conserve their energy. And the dormancy period is the plants are basically going to sleep for the winter, and that's why they lose their leaves or they lose their flowers. But the most success, as everyone has said, is kind of spring into summer, definitely.
And just to go back to my point, like in California, we fertilize early September to have a beautiful October and November bloom. So that's why it totally depends on where you live.
Yeah, and it does depend on the type of rose. David Austins are heavy feeders. They throw a lot of blooms. They throw a lot of big flowers. Deadheading falls into this too, the more which goes into pruning. But when I have been on a heavy travel schedule and I'm not there in June and I don't give them that little midsummer feed, I notice that they do struggle a little more through the heat of summer, and I might not get the amount of blooms as if I were home and, deadheading and feeding. I know too, roses also like a foliar feed. If you can give them a little sea kelp or something spray as a treat after they've had that big flush, it also helps give you more flowers.
So it sounds like a mathematical equation. The more blooms, the more fertilizer they need. The more fertilizer you need, the more blooms they get. So, yeah.
But don't over fertilize because that's going to increase your disease pressure too.
Okay, and we'll get to diseases. Did somebody else have something? Okay. So you've answered the questions, and I just want to clarify for an older rose bush. I think somebody specifically had said that they have a 6-year-old one. Somebody may have a 10-year-old, a 20-year-old rose bush. So would your advice be different for an older rose bush as compared to some of the newer varieties, newer breeding?
I don't think necessarily. I think I guess if the question is more that you feel like the older bush isn't kind of performing or producing, it might be a good idea to kind of get like a soil test just to kind of see what's going on. That maybe if the pH is off or something, there might be some reason, or some specific nutrient that's missing. So, but otherwise, I would just recommend kind of the same regime.
And trial and error. Everybody has different soil, different rose types, different fertilizers they're using. So I think you guys are giving some really good guidelines, and then a little bit of trial and error as everything is in gardening. Okay, so now we've got questions about pruning, and I heard Rebecca talk a little bit about that for climbing roses. Here's a specific question. What about pruning in zone 3, which obviously we have very cold winters, less snow these days with climate change than what we previously had? So in today's day and age, and I realize that your advice will be very different based on region, so maybe you can specify that, and maybe different rose types. We heard Lacey say that ground cover roses probably aren't going to need pruning. So if some of you can chime in and tell us different types of roses, pruning in different regions. It's probably a book that we're writing, but if you guys can answer it today, that would be great.
Maybe I'll just start, and I'm sure that this group actually has different opinions, which I think is always interesting to hear. But I think you don't have to prune a rose in most cases. I think that it's more of aesthetics, especially with newer genetics, that you want it to get cleaned up, and usually when you do prune, you want to prune in the spring, because after the plant wakes up for the spring, you can start to see if there's any dead canes, which is what the branches are called. You can always clean up the middle part to help promote the growth and just to help that stature improve year to year. But if you don't want to do anything, I don't think it's a requirement. And I'm sure somebody wants to contradict that, but I think that a lot of them are easy and foolproof. But a lot of the older genetics, which, Mr. Lincoln, some of them that have been around for 20, 30 years, those you do need to clean up. But with newer genetics that you would find in your local garden center, that are being introduced from this group here, I think a lot of them are designed for low maintenance. So, it's great if you can fertilize, it's great if you can prune, but chances are it's still going to look good.
Lacey, I would agree with that. I think a lot of the newer shrub roses, in particular ground cover roses, shape or prune to size or shape. If they're growing a little bit bigger than you want, cut them back by a third in late winter, early spring. Obviously, get rid of dead, dying, diseased canes. Can help, but a lot of those shrub roses with modern breeding, I agree with Lacey, don't really need it. Though it can help with air circulation if you've got crossing canes or small canes, smaller than a pencil size, typically. Get rid of those and it can improve your vigor and improve your blooming, even on some of the newer varieties that can help too.
Mhm.
I
With the
think,
David,
yeah, go ahead.
with the David Austins, the younger the rose, the less pruning you're really going to do. There's no need to open up the center on a David Austin rose. Let's say you now have a 5-year-old plant. Go back and just look at its position in the garden with the design eye. Is it doing what you want it to do? And if you're happy, leave it alone. If you're like, you know what, you're encroaching on my peonies over here, don't be afraid to whack it back. Roses are incredibly resilient. They're forgiving. You're not going to kill it. A lot of times I will go in with my David Austins that are 5 years plus and cut them back by half. One of the things that we have started doing in our trials, there is a large event called Jersey Days. We have a trial at Over the Best Nursery in New Jersey. And the roses were starting to look tired after a particularly hot summer. And we went in the last week of July and did a hard summer prune on them. And we got fresh foliage, an amazing flush for an October 3rd event. And it really made us start rethinking what we're going to tell our customers, because it was wow. It was really worth the effort to do that. So
for us at Star Roses and Plants, we really do recommend a pretty decent prune in late winter, early spring. There was one year years ago where we did kind of a test of like some trimmed and non-trimmed in our trial field, and the non-trimmed material did bloom earlier, but I would say the trimmed material just looked so much more spectacular on the spring flush. One comment I'll make about knockout roses, they are 3 to 4 feet by 3 to 4 feet if you're trimming them every year. I've seen them in the landscape where people don't trim them, and they will be monsters of like 8 to 10 feet tall. So there's that. And then I will second Rebecca's comment about that like midsummer prune. I've definitely heard a lot of commentary from people, particularly in the South, where it's more common practice for them to do that like midsummer prune for like just an amazing fall flush. So I'm an advocate for the pruning, and maybe, if it is, if you really do it once a year, it's a little bit labor intensive. If it was really something that you couldn't get to, you could probably skip it every year. But I recommend it.
Thank you, Christine. That's exactly what I was going to say. The rows need to be regenerated. Yes, ground cover and shrub. The problem is at the end of the season, you're going to have a 6 feet tall hybrid tea. If you don't prune it, sorry, but how are you going to smell the flower? That's I like to chop them down to 12 inches so the first bloom is at 2.5, so I could smell them. The second flush is at 4 feet. When you reach 6 feet tall, I have no interest to look for those flowers. And some of them will reach bigger than that. And you leave a lot of disease. They don't look clean if you don't prune them. You have a lot of old wood and old cane, and by cutting them, you rejuvenate. I can say that word properly, but anyway, you bring new branches and they look fresh and you look clean. Yes, they're gonna survive. They're gonna bloom, but they're not gonna look as good as if you just clean them. And yes, it's true that we're testing them. We're testing our roses, no spray, no water. I got a guy in New York that he doesn't even water the field. He just doesn't think about it. And I go there in August, it's like 85, 90 degree, and no spray for 2 years, no water. And some of them are looking great. And that's how we make selection. And for the first 2-3 years, yes, the pruning, it's better to do it, but comes a point when the plants get older, you just want to clean. You want to clean it, to clean some of the old branch, make sure you have space. They don't all overlap, and it looks a lot nicer.
Okay, so now my question probably comes from a lazy point of view. When you're talking about pruning, are you talking about shearing off down to like a third or whatever you said, 12 or 18 inches? Or do you need to be more meticulous and, you know, clip each cane?
Get the hedge trimmer, chop it
Okay,
down.
I like that answer.
But there's a difference between deadheading, which is removing the flower that are spent during the summer month, which you promote new growth and new flower production, and you don't want to have the hips unless you want to attract the bird in the fall. That's a different story. But if you want the maximum flower, you're going to do the deadheading during the summer month, but then winter or spring, if you're in the northern climate, you're going to cut them down to 12, 18 inches, whatever you want to cut as low as you want.
Yeah, I agree. You can definitely take like an electric or gas hedge trimmer and do it that way. Or if you want to, use a hand loppers and do it that way, there's really no need to get in there and, like hand trim like one like little stem for one little stem, unless you want to.
I say hedge trimmer, and I'm outside right now pruning my roses one by one with my clipper because they're my baby. I still want to take care of them, but yes. I mean, I've seen the effect of cutting them with tractors, and they look fantastic.
Yeah. I know it horrifies the audience to hear us as the professionals saying this, but you have to realize too, a lot of times when you're working with a trial or we're working with thousands and thousands of roses. When we go and visit our growers who are doing this for us, and we're saying, you need to cut these back in the can, so they can branch and bush. Remember, the more stems you have, the more roses you're going to get. And that's going to require you pruning.
Excellent. Okay. Now where are we going to go here? Let's go with this question. The rabbits have girdled around my rose canes this harsh winter. In some cases, all the canes all the way down. So do I need to prune? Should I cut down the remaining canes like the same size or like the 12 inches? This is in Buffalo, New York, Zone 6.
You need to find a hunter friend that will take care of your problem. Actually, just a quick story without answering the question is like when we had the trial garden in California, we had let's say we have about 200 different selection we were selling, and the rabbit were chewing specifically on lavender and purples. So they had the choice of all the colors, but those were the two colors they were chewing. So there must be something that was tasting sweet or something for them. But systematically, every year they were chewing on those roses.
Okay, so if you have a lot of rabbits, not the purple or lavender ones.
But yeah, so she needs to cut those canes that have been damaged for sure. Or he or she, sorry, I say she, but
okay, they.
And I would just say, I don't know what kind of rose you have, but if they've eaten it all the way down to the ground where there's no stem, it would be interesting to look at what rose comes up for you this next growing season, because there are two types of rose. There are own root roses, which I think a lot of the people on this panel probably, I know Monrovia only grows own root roses, which means the rose is the same rose in the roots as it is as the flower. But there's also grafted roses, which is where a root stock that is vigorous or disease resistant is used, and then the scion is grafted on top of that. So if you lose that top scion and you only have the rootstock, you might get the rose that comes up is not the same rose that you planted. So just something to watch out for.
That's a very good point. So if you have rabbit issues and they're chewing it down too far, then okay, that's a good thing to look for. Let's see here. Okay, so now we've got some disease question. That was pest. We have another pest question. How can I control, or better yet, eliminate Japanese beetles on roses? Probably the same answer for all zones.
I can just we get Japanese beetles in southeastern Pennsylvania, and they are annoying. I don't have any personal experience, but I've heard a lot of really great things about milky spore. So I believe it's like a granular, it's like a beneficial bacteria, I think, that you apply to the soil. I think you need to do it specifically in the fall months, and that helps destroy and kill the grubs in the soil. So you, over time, reduce the emergence of the Japanese beetles. So I've heard really good things about that. We unfortunately do have to spray for them in our trial fields. I, wish we could kind of go to maybe that type of method at some point, but that's a little bit more environmentally friendly. But that's a suggestion I have.
Yeah, with Japanese beetles, one thing you do not want to do is squish them, or even set the pheromone traps, because Japanese beetles come, like if you squish a Japanese beetle, it's going to release the pheromone, and all the other Japanese beetles are going to go, there's a party over here, something's going on, and they're going to flock to your yard. So Kristen's correct. Milky spore does work. Try to figure out, am I in a Japanese beetle prone zone, and just be prepared. And don't put those pheromone traps in there and then start squishing bugs to kill them after you've picked them off, because it will bring more in.
And I have found the little old fashioned, cup with a little Dawn dishwasher. I did that for 3 years running, and every year there were fewer and fewer, to where this past summer I had almost zero Japanese beetles.
Great.
So that was me here in Chicago in a kind of an average summer. Okay. What about any other diseases? One that I wanted to ask you guys about was rose rosette. So what can you tell us about that? How do you identify it? How do you get rid of it?
So rose rosette is a virus that affects roses. It's identified by when you see it on a plant, it's called witch's broom. So you'll see a branch that's just like really divided, and I guess, for lack of a better term, looks like a witch's broom. So it's like just like lots of little tiny branches that go in all sorts of directions. The new growth is typically really dark red, but don't confuse that, because some roses genetically do have naturally new red growth. But this is different. And another characteristic is excessive thorniness. And it's, unfortunately, if you do have a rose that has that, it will eventually kill the rose over time.
And you don't want to leave it in the garden. If you see one plant that has it, you need to bag it, put a plastic bag on top, and you dig it, and you seal the bag, because the virus is spread by area fid mite. So when you have the virus, likely you have a high population of mites. So if you just leave it there, the mites are gonna move to the next plant and spread the virus. So as early as you can, you have to remove that plant from your garden. I know it might be one rose that you love, but it's better to lose one than lose the entire garden. So just be vigilant on that. If you see one symptomatic plant, just remove it as soon as possible. Again, the plastic bag on top, shovel all the roots in, close the bag, you could let it sit in the sun to bake it, to make sure you kill everything that's alive, and then you put it in the trash. But don't leave it in the garden.
Excellent. Okay.
Roundup or glyphosate or 2,4-D damage, if you have a landscaper or a gardener that is, spraying that in your garden or a neighboring garden, and it's breezy, you can get that drift, and it will distort the foliage. That is often more of a chartreuse green, lime green. You can get funky looking foliage. You can get funky thorns, even some witch brooming with that. But and it's normally green when that's the problem. But don't keep that rose in your garden if it's red and you're like, yeah, this is it. Just I know roses can be expensive, but just sacrifice it, get it out.
And again, go to, if you're questioning, is this some sort of pesticide drift or is it rose rosette? Go to your local extension, local garden center, take a branch in, find out exactly what's wrong and to know whether or not you need to get rid of it. Okay. Sorry, did you guys answer this? Are beneficial nematodes helpful if applied to your grass in the spring to prevent beetles, the Japanese beetles?
So I think we talked about the milky spore. So I think the question was nematodes, but it's not, I mean, unless I haven't heard of nematodes specifically that go after Japanese beetle, but the milky spore is,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. I'm trying to categorize these so we're not all over, but let's see here. I have a new dawn climber. The canes are tall without many side shoots. So should she cut it halfway down to encourage more growth? And this is zone 8 near Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah. What I would definitely do is try to get those long canes going horizontal or 45-degree angle or wrapping around something. When a cane goes straight up, it's not going to really want to, it's going to be tempted to produce flowers only at the tip. And when you bend that cane at that 45 or wrapping around a pillar or a post, or you go horizontal, it's going to encourage those little flowering shoots to come out. And that's what's going to give you the flowers there. Cutting it back by half is just going to make that main cane shorter. Now, it could be a really old main cane that is woody and it's time for it to be removed all the way down to the base and let some new canes develop, and then you're going to have a better chance at flowering.
Okay, going back to disease. The question is, are you more likely to introduce a disease in the shearing method of pruning versus carefully cutting? Use clean tools.
I don't think so. Yeah, start with clean tools. I don't think shearing is going to introduce more disease unless you already have a really diseased plant. Let's say you've got something that has a lot of black spot. And you are going straight from it onto the next group of plants. That could spread those spores. Remember, pruning is also a way of cleaning up the garden. So like any leaves that are dropping, if it's like February and you're pruning, go ahead and strip off those old leaves. I know for people in Southern California where you never really get winter and you never really defoliate, the idea of stripping that foliage off seems quite laborious. But if you've got clean roses, I'm not so worried about it. But if you are in an area that has a lot of disease pressure and you know black spot is your villain, just be proactive. So clean tools, don't go from one infected area straight to the other without cleaning the tools. And you can also do loppers or hand pruners in an area you think may be more susceptible.
The only thing you could spread as mosaic virus or viruses through the pruning shear. But right from the start, if you have a plant that shows some symptom, like the discolored leaves with the yellow pattern, you should not keep those in the garden, because if you come in with a shear and then you go through this one, it's transmitted to sap. So anyway, it's not likely, but you should not keep those plants anyway.
Okay, we're good. We're down to the last 5 minutes, believe it or not, and I've got a few, I'll call them miscellaneous questions. So I'm going to pose these miscellaneous questions to you, and then all 5 of you get your chance to answer one of these questions as your closing thoughts. So somebody wants to know like your favorite varieties for cut flowers, especially in a zone like 3. So you can talk about your favorite varieties. You can talk about your favorite varieties for cut flowers. That's one question. Companion plants. for roses is another question. You got to choose one of these. Favorite way to use roses besides in the garden as a cut flower? Does anybody use rose hips, rose petals? I think, yeah. So who wants to go first, and which question are you answering?
I'll talk about companion plants because that's fun. My favorite companion plants for roses, I think lavender, beautiful. I think anything with a different texture. So you think about the classic flower of a rose, and you think like, how can you add some different forms? So that upright, lavender, ornamental grasses, things like that are really, really nice with roses. I also like for more like a cottage garden, more rambling style roses, like a nice trimmed evergreen hedge, like a boxwood or a ilex or something like that looks really nice as a contrast. But I do love those flowering lavender with roses or catmint, anything like that.
It gives you the other scents as well.
Mhm.
Okay, who else is going to tackle one of these three questions?
I'll talk about alternative. So, a lot of David Alston's do produce beautiful hips. And come July, August, depending on where you live in the country, you need to stop deadheading if you want to bring those hips on. The King's Rose will become available in the US next year. It was introduced with a pretty big splash in England last year. When I went to the trials to do kind of a late summer cutback, I was wowed, absolutely floored by the number of hips on that rose. And even though it's our first striped rose, I'm like, this thing's all about the hips. So I think they're ornamental. Yes, high impact with vitamin C. You can cut them in wreaths, what have you, leave them for the wildlife. So I'm all about the hips.
And it's
Sounds
a
like a
trend.
song.
It's a trend in Europe too. The bee friendly flower and the hips
Yes.
production. It's a trend in Europe. Hopefully that will come to the US too.
Yes.
I think somebody needs to write us a blog about rose hips. So I will follow up with you guys after the fact. Okay, let's hear. Who hasn't, Lacey, which question are you going to answer?
Well, the one that I feel like is the easiest for me is the companion plants, but I think Georgia said a lot of the plants that I think are complementary to rose gardens. I think that it's something you can have a lot of fun with too, whether you are in the Pacific Northwest or the Deep South. There's lots of other regional plants that do really well in the same type of soil, same, amount of sun. I think is nice to incorporate it too. So then that way you just have a visually interesting landscape. And it doesn't have to be hard. I think that's the biggest thing that, we always try to communicate with our plants and just the companion plants. We call them best buds. What do you want out of it? And then you can make it as complex as you want it, but it really can be as it's just different textures or scents. Laura petalum does really nice next to roses as well. I have some pittosporum, so something like an evergreen. Some of these questions are a little challenging because I'm in zone 10, like Christian. So having a zone 3 question is a little, it requires me to think a little bit. But yeah, the biggest thing is have fun with the roses. You can bring them indoors, have different colors throughout your garden.
Someone was asking about the Zone 3 best cut flower. Man, that's not an easy one. There's a lot of shrub that were hybridized by Agriculture Canada, the Modern Research Station. I mean, Zone 3, we're talking really cold. Not too many roses survive in Zone 3. I mean, Zone 5 and 4. I mean, to survive in Zone 3, that mean without protection. The real hardiness question is normally to be Zone 3, you mean you plant in the ground and without winter protection it survives. So that's the real test. Yeah, I don't know what kind of best cut roses in zone 3, but I would look into some of the older Agriculture Canada. I don't know, Bailey, you probably go up to zone 4, I'm guessing, but I don't think there's too many zone 3. There's not too many zone 3 breeder other than what was done at the Modern Research Station, some of the Rugosa, some of the older species, and some of the Explorer series. Those are all like zone 2, zone 3, like crazy colardy, but they're not really cut flower. I mean, you could still make a bouquet with them, but they don't last like a hybrid tea in the garden.
Okay. And Kristen, I think you get the last word here. So which question are you choosing?
Yeah, I think, was there any one that I missed that wasn't answered? Or I guess I'll have to tag on to the,
Or you can talk about maybe your favorite uses other than here's my garden plant. Is there anything else that you do with
yeah.
roses, rose petals, hips, etc.?
Um, I would just say that we do from time to time bring some cuts in. I guess maybe I'll try to answer a little bit of the cut question and what I like to do with them. Yeah, the zone 3 cut is a really challenging one. We do test in zone 4, and we do have a nice variety that is like a hybrid tea type, Parfuma Sunrise, that is at least zone 4 hardy, and makes a pretty nice cut for indoor. We are seeing a kind of new interest. It seems like every year there's more and more interest in garden roses for outdoor cuts. So some of those that work really well, particularly in our area, are Parfuma Bliss, bred by Cordis, and Sweet Mademoiselle, Francis Mayand. So we have been working on trying to, making a collection of those varieties that do well. So when we do bring some roses into the office to test vase life from time to time, we just kind of take when they start fading a little bit, we kind of take the petals and just put them, like float them in a little tray of water. And it's nice. We can enjoy the petals and for several days, and it looks beautiful. So it's just a fun thing to do with them.
There you go. Yes. Okay. Well, we are out of time, unfortunately. We ran over. Sorry about that. But, when you've got a lot of good information and opinions to share, we did not get into the great rose pruning debate or anything. I thought we might, but you guys all had wonderful information, expertise, ideas. I love it. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our attendees. And we'll be sending out a follow-up email with a recording here. So you can watch it again in case you missed anything. So thank you, everybody.